Morena, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the City Delivery Committee meeting this Tuesday, the 28th of April 2026. In terms of health and safety, if an alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit. The assembly point is down Devonport Road. This meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, please remember to speak clearly into the microphone and please have your phones on silent. I'm going to open with an opening karakia. Tū taua mai roka, tū taua mai rāroa, tū taua mai roto, tū taua mai waho. Kia tauau, te mori tū, te mori ora ki te katoa, humi e, hui e, tai ki e. And that's saying to come forth from above, below, within and from the environment, bringing vitality and well-being for all, strengthened in unity. We don't have any apologies today. Welcome to everyone around the table. We have no late items or confidential business to be transferred. There are no changes to the order of business, although there is the agenda did talk about an acquisition of property report, but that's now going to the full council meeting. So we now go to the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of March. Are we doing that before?
It's page 10 of the agenda.
Yeah. Page 10 of our first agenda. I will just make a comment, please, to Marty and staff. Again, it's having 4 separate agendas just makes it a little bit difficult. If we can work on that one, please. So we've got the minutes of the City Delivery Committee held on the 10th of March 2026. Have we got any corrections to those minutes? There being no corrections, could I have a mover and seconder for those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Baker, Councillor Morris. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you. Any changes in declaration of conflict of interest or anything specific for the meeting today? And just as a comment to around the room and for those online, we have all of us declared our conflicts of interest, which are, I think, on the website. So this just records any changes we've had for those or specifically conflicts for this meeting. So now we're on section 9, deputations, presentations and petitions, and we have a petition here. I would ask that Karen Wardell and Jay Banner come and join us at the table. Yes, you can certainly join, sorry. So this is a petition on curbing noisy and reckless driving in Mount Maunganui. And we are also joined by Inspector Clifford Paxton. I think I'm going to get them. I'm going to read the names out and hope I've got them correct for you. So welcome, Senior Sergeant Wayne Hunter and Constable Mark Sanders. Welcome, it's nice to have you here. We understand we are allowed to ask questions of law of you, but not other things if we're in question time. So welcome. You've got 5 minutes each, so 10 minutes between you, and if we can allow for questions in that time, that would be great too. But please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Your Worship, Councillors, Committee members. My name is Karen Wardell, and I'm speaking on behalf of more than 1,250 people who signed a petition about dangerous and noisy driving at the Mount. For a population of around 20,000, this represents a serious level of concern of the residents. I'd like to briefly walk you through the key points. So what are the issues that we are facing? There is daily dangerous driving at the Mount. This includes rapid acceleration, engine revving, excessively loud tuned-up vehicles, aggressive driving, and driving behavior consistent with cruising. And this happens every day. It happens in the day, it happens in the evening, it happens all through the night and weekends. It's more prominent around the CBD, the Marine Parade, Monganui Road, and some of the side streets around these areas. And I live right in the middle of it. Why does this matter? So looking at transport safety research, if a car is driving at 30 kilometers an hour and hits a pedestrian, it has a risk of death of 10%. Get up to 50 kilometers an hour, and that risk rises to 80%. There are some examples of injuries that some of the residents have given to me in the appendix in the pamphlet I've just shown you. So as a community, we've tried to curb the danger. We've reported dangerous and antisocial driving many, many times, and it's been ineffective. So I think a preventative solution is needed. I think the key to the problem is prevention. So we've been looking at ways that you could reduce cruising and improve safety at the Mount. How do we do this? As Tauranga Council, you have the power under the Land Transport Act and local bylaws to regulate traffic and control this cruising behaviour. As an example, Christchurch introduced an anti-cruising bylaw in Sumner. There, they used a coordinated preventative approach. They used bylaws, signage, and enforcement, and it was very effective. But a broader solution would be clever street design. Many towns in New Zealand use self-enforcing streets that control traffic safety. This design encourages drivers to travel at safe, controlled speeds. So when visiting other towns in New Zealand, such as Queenstown, Wanaka, Taupo, Napier, I noticed how calm and safe their streets felt. These towns have been very proactive. They've implemented traffic calming measures and clever street design. They've used things like one-way narrow streets, pedestrian-only streets, curbs, chicanes, raised walkways, judder bars, and lowered the speed limits down to 10 kilometres in very high-risk areas. And it really works well. In high pedestrian, tourist areas, streets should behave like places for people, not places for high-speed traffic. So what are we, the residents of the Mount, asking for? We're not asking to remove vehicles from the Mount. We're rather asking to develop a long-term solution that is sustainable and enforceable. We respectfully ask Council to consider preventative solutions mentioned, such as adopting cruising bylaws, using traffic calming measures, adopting stronger penalties for dangerous, noisy driving, and liaising with our community and the police to ensure that enforcement is sustained. Cruising and speeding is dangerous. It's also very upsetting to our Mount residents and a blight on the worldwide reputation of the Mount and Tauranga. This is a big opportunity here to solve the problem. So please help make the Mount safer for us all. Allow us as residents to reside in a livable community, improve the reputation of our town, and help ensure the prosperity of our businesses. Thank you for your time. Might be better to let Jay have his word to give a complete story.
All yours. You can move the
You can, yeah.
thingamy, yes.
Good morning, Mayor, councillors, staff and members of the public. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. For the councillors, you will see a document that I've circulated. So for me, this is both personal and as a representative of Mount Main Street businesses. The photo that is on the front of that document is my 75-year-old mother, and that is a result of her being startled by boy races and having a fall, fracturing her skull, and this photo speaks for itself. She also had an incident where she has poor eyesight, didn't see a boy racer out the corner of her eye who then accelerated at her, slammed on his brakes before hitting her, again scaring her, but putting her in her home where she didn't leave the house for 3 weeks. And now she will literally only walk downtown if either myself or one of my siblings are accompanying her. I want to begin by acknowledging the work Council is doing to support a vibrant, thriving community, but what I'm here to raise today sits directly alongside that goal, because right now there's a growing issue that's undermining both safety and the experience of our town. The issue's the increasing level of boy racer activity in our key public areas. I want to be clear from the outset, this is not about being anti-youth and it's not about being anti-car culture, but it is about behaviour, safety and ensuring that our shared public spaces are enjoyable and accessible for everyone. And I firmly believe that everybody has a right to feel safe in their local community. At the moment, that balance is not being achieved. Firstly, there's very real public safety concerns. We're seeing excessive speed in areas that are heavily used by pedestrians, families, cyclists and older members of our community. There are regular reports of dangerous manoeuvres, rapid acceleration and informal racing. These are not harmless displays, they create genuine risk, and we are hearing more and more about near misses. Even when incidents don't result in injury, the perception of danger is enough to change behaviour. People are avoiding areas that they would normally feel comfortable in. And secondly, there is the issue of noise, fumes and ongoing disruption. This is not occasional or isolated. It is persistent, engine revving, modified exhaust, street racing late into the night. Residents are experiencing regular sleep disruption and businesses are dealing with an environment that becomes increasingly difficult to manage, not just in the evenings, but also during the day. Another point, and one I want to emphasise strongly, is the economic impact on local businesses when we can least afford it. Hospitality operators are telling us that this behaviour is directly affecting their trade. Outdoor dining, which is such an important part of our local atmosphere, becomes unusable when noise and fumes escalate. Customers cut their visits short or in some cases choose not to come at all. We're working hard to attract people into our town centre to encourage them to stay longer and spend locally, and this activity is actively working against that. Finally, there's a broader issue of behaviour and perception. The boy races can create an atmosphere that feels intimidating. Whether that is the intent or not, the effect is the same. Families, visitors and residents feel uncomfortable. Over time, that begins to shape the reputation of the area and not in a positive way. So what are we asking for? Firstly, stronger and more visible enforcement. A consistent presence during peak time would go a long way to deterring this behaviour. We also encourage the use of tools such as noise monitoring or speed enforcement where possible, along with clear and immediate consequences for dangerous driving and illegal vehicle modifications. We'd like to see a review of bylaws and enforcement mechanisms. If there are gaps that make it difficult to respond quickly to antisocial vehicle activity, we would ask that these are addressed so enforcement can be more effective. And to conclude, this is about balance. We want a town that is vibrant, energetic and attractive, but we also need it to be safe, welcoming and comfortable for residents, visitors and businesses alike. Right now that balance is under pressure. We're asking Council to prioritise this issue and to work alongside police, businesses and the wider community to implement practical and effective solutions, because ultimately we want people to come, to stay and to enjoy our town and what it has to offer, not leave because they feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Thank you.
Well said, and I couldn't agree more with you. Any questions? Councillor Carrack.
Thank you, and this could be more of a question to police, but perhaps you could answer it. There's the current bill, the Antisocial Road Use Legislation Amendment Bill. Do you think that would help address the issues? I understand it hasn't been passed through the parliamentary process, but are you aware of that legislation and the proposed upshot from that?
I am aware that the council have been looking at an anti-cruising bylaw, and I've been awaiting a draft of that bylaw to have a review of it. But I believe that if we could strengthen the bylaws, that would definitely help, and it's about enforcement and I think presence around particularly the Main Street and Marine Parade more frequently.
Sorry, just to correct it, it's a central government bill, an act of parliament. They're proposing to amend the current one, which is a bit light, and increasing infringements to $1,000 if they don't move on, etc. You aware of that? That's coming up? Oh, okay.
No, I wasn't, sorry.
Mayor Mahe.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Obviously, certainly have heard a bit about boy races, etc. So appreciate you bringing it to our attention in a very good process. So I'm just interested. You spoke about Monganui Road Marine Parade. I guess the problem is, do we then just push it somewhere else? So where are the problems at the moment? Is it just those two streets at the moment?
No, it's all of the streets, but there's parts where boy races can just take off and accelerate, in speed, and Marine Parade is one of them. But it's everywhere, and it's all the time. And it's not as noticeable if you live off the main area, but the CBD sometimes, over Christmas it was awful. I went to a restaurant. I can't believe that they're even able to operate, because we sat at a roundabout and we couldn't talk. We actually left. It was so noisy. The problem is that, and we do see police around. We've seen more police around the last week than we've seen in the whole 6 months, but we'd never ever see anybody pulled over, anybody that's racing. And it's always, last night, over the weekend, it went on all weekend. It starts around 4 o'clock. It went on till about 12 midnight. There was an altercation in front of our apartment where 6 guys got out and threatened one of the pedestrians walking past, threw all their rubbish at him, and then made like 10 circles around just to punish him for making a comment about it. This is the sort of behaviour. And a lot of the things in my pamphlet are from residents, and they don't want to even say their name because they're so frightened of reprisal. And I've had lots of conversations with residents, and I say, well, let's videotape them and show it to police. They say, I'm not willing to stand out there because I'm frightened. I'm frightened of them. So there's a level of fear of residents, as well as annoyance, as well as just it's a terribly bad safety issue as well. So I think if you were to talk to people along Marine Parade, or if you were to talk to people that live close to the CBD, you'd find everybody's pretty upset about it. You also live in an apartment, don't you? Yeah, so, I've lived at a lot of different places, but I would say I've never seen this before in a community. It's sort of, and it's just astounding to me that nobody does anything about it.
No, thank you. We can obviously ask the police some questions, but yes, I've also had complaints up around Blake Park as well, so around Monganui Road. But
yeah. That Mount Drury the child playing area is a particularly bad thing. I think they actually took out the bump there to the crossroad, and there's kids playing there all the time, and mums are really worried. I've talked to some mums at that place, and they're really worried. They don't like to bring their kids there because it's right by Monganui Road, and and also they all tend to congregate around that area as well.
No, thank you.
Yes, and I have met a number of residents with the same issues, and we have raised it through our staff. So just from a bylaw perspective, are we working on was there a draft that was mentioned? Is there some work on a bylaw, anti-cruising bylaw? Yes, please.
Sorry, Karen Hay is off sick today, so you're stuck with me. Yeah, so we've done some initial investigation alongside Christchurch and found that it hasn't been as effective as they'd hoped in Christchurch. So awaiting on what's happening with future government bill to potentially help give it a bit more teeth, because it doesn't have a whole heap at the moment. But yeah, reliant on what that means, and also how it can then be enforced, because we are well aware that it does take some fairly substantial resources from police to then pull people over and enforce it.
Did the police want to make a comment? If they're comfortable? Welcome. Red means go in this building. It will feel very odd for you. We won't pull you over.
Yeah, Maureen Tato, called Clifford Paxton Ho, the Area Commander of Western Bay of Plenty.
Yeah, I'm Wayne Hunter. I'm the Area Road Policing Manager for Western Bay of Plenty.
Welcome, and it's great that you have joined us this morning.
Perhaps if I could just speak generally first, and then maybe talk about some more specifics when we get through that. I think, firstly, from a police perspective, I do want to acknowledge there is a conflict of users in relation to the Mount Peninsula. You've certainly got people that are driving in that area for no other reason than to be seen and heard, and that conflicts with people that are there to dine in the Mount Main Street, along with the residents, obviously, who live there, and also beach users, some of which include very young children. So we do acknowledge there is a conflict of users in relation to that particular area. That the evidence itself doesn't show a significant issue in relation to speed, both the council data and from what our own police members have observed. Speed in itself is not a significant issue. There is, however, issues in relation to noise. And one of the conversations we've had with relation to council is there's probably some opportunities in relation to installing some decibel meters in that particular area, probably in relation to the Mount Main Street, probably the Mall, Marine Parade, but also having a control area to see what the difference is between the control area and those particular other streets. Because what we do note is there is issues with acoustics around noise in terms of the Mount Peninsula, and so what we want to know is there a difference between the peninsula itself and other areas, or is there in fact a significant noise issue there? That'll also give us an ability to ascertain what those readings are against the Land Transport Act and see what sort of offending is being evidenced. We have done operations previously around noise, and there's certainly opportunities for us to do that again. We have been deploying to the Mount Peninsula to have a look at some of the behaviours there, some of the speed, some of the noise. There's probably an opportunity for us to look wider than that as well across the entire area. But what we do see, obviously, is that conflict of users and perceptions around driver behaviour. And perhaps a good example of that was last week with the D1NZ event, where they obtained a traffic management plan to go down into the Marine Parade, principally for no other reason to be seen and heard, but also what resulted in that were calls for service. But what we found in investigating those calls for service, there was no offences disclosed. So concerns around speed, driver behaviour. In fact, there's a call around a person holding a weapon. They simply weren't able to be substantiated. So where you've got people standing on the side of the road, or in fact dining on the side of the road, vehicles travelling past, the perceptions are often quite different to the reality around speed and dangerous behaviour. So for us, I think at the end of the day, there's further opportunity to deploy into that area, but I think there's also opportunity for us to take an evidence-based approach, perhaps hand in hand with council around some of these decibel meters, and let's get a look at what is actually happening down that area, and does that differ from other parts of that peninsula.
Thank you very much, and a good explanation, Me Mahe.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So just wanted to define cruising: driving repeatedly in the same direction over the same section of road in a motor vehicle in a manner that draws attention to the power or sound of the engines of the motor vehicles being driven, or creates a convoy that is formed otherwise than in trade and impedes traffic flow. So that's just from the New Zealand Land Transport Act 1998. That was just, I think it's useful to know what cruising is. But I just had a comment on what you just said around noise. So is there a noise restriction, is there? And then the challenge is that you can't enforce it because you've got to prove that car's too noisy, is that?
Yeah, the Land Transport Act sets out levels of noise for noisy vehicles. And so for us, as I say, we've done significant work on this in the past. And basically what it requires us is to prove is that the vehicle is noisier than when it was manufactured. What we do find is some of these vehicles that are noisy do have current warrants of fitness. So there can be some challenges in relation to that. But I think getting some evidence around what is being heard in the community would be really beneficial for us, because that would also give us a benchmark against what those parameters are under the Land Transport Act. Are they outside of that, or are they within that? Does it relate to particular vehicles? And as I say, are we getting different ratings in that particular part of the peninsula compared to other parts of the peninsula, which then can perhaps give us an opportunity to look at how we deploy in those areas.
I can also point out for... Oh, let's drag this over a bit. Oop.
No, that
no, it's fine.
doesn't need it.
Okay. Regarding noisy vehicles, the fine is $50. Okay, 20 demerits though, which is good, but $50 is nothing. They don't care. What we do is it's a subjective or objective test. If we think it's noisy, we can give it a green sticker, and they have to go to a acoustic specialist and get a certified that it's all right. So that's about the only thing we can do. $50 is nothing to these guys.
So then I'm just following up on that, the cruising, if it's in the Act, is there no enforcement against
Right. So
cruising?
when I heard about the petition, I jumped in. I said, well, let's do the anti-cruising law. So I contacted Christchurch, my counterparts down there, and they basically laughed at me. They said, waste of time, absolute waste of time. The legislation's got no teeth. The anti-cruising, you've got to cruise around 5 times. It's got to be the same person each time driving that vehicle. And you just can't do it. They said they've never done anyone. They've got the signs up, but they said they just can't do the legislation. It's got no teeth. So I spoke to council about that, and we agreed. People drive down Monganui Road looking for a park. Boy Racing say, we're looking for a park. We have to drive around again, because you know what it's like looking for a park on Monganui Road. There's a defence. So the anti-cruising law will not work in the Mount.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I think you might have to, yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the idea of no speeding around the Mount, because I just would like to ask the police if they've got actual evidence for that, because that's not what we noticed at night. We noticed people going down there up to 80 miles an hour along a marine... kilometres, yeah. So I just wanted to know how they base that. Is that just anecdotal, or is that, like, I never see a police car, I've never seen any kind of cameras doing speed checks down there. And I would dispute that. And the other point being, speeding is one thing, but massively, rapidly accelerating your car is another thing. And then when you rapidly accelerate a car, which is what they are doing all the time, that's dangerous. So I would dispute that, and I would like to know that they've investigated that thoroughly and they've looked at the speeds, because that's not what we're seeing. It is very, very noisy, and it's very upsetting, and it's a sort of almost an unlivable thing to listen to all the noise all the time. And then the second point about, we're talking about what to do with these people. Sorry, yeah, just one quick thing. I don't think this is about putting laws in place. I think this is about redesigning the whole area so that they can't do this. So, you know, block off, they make one-way streets, make it that there's dead ends, there's narrower streets, there's, you know, curbs, that they can't do any of this, and it'll just stop them doing it. And that's what all these other towns have done. I think trying to put in laws and you know, police try. I know they try, but it's a different problem. I think we have to prevent it.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Schuler, did you have a question? Marty Mahe.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor, just to the police, just you mentioned that question before about some of the noisy cars, you find they have warrants. So just in general though, would there be a higher correlation of non-compliant vehicles that are modified or noisy, or in general?
Yeah, probably in general. Look, some of these vehicles do have warrants, albeit they would sound noisier than when manufactured. But some of these vehicles have also been certified, so they've been certified in relation to the exhaust systems. But yes, there is some obviously that are there that aren't up to warrant fitness standard, and those are the ones, as Wayne said, we'll issue a green stick and go and get them rechecked through authorised reviewers. Just in relation to the speed stuff, council itself has speed records in relation to that area. I'm not sure whether that information is publicly available or not, but our members would support that data that's already available. We're seeing the same sorts of things.
Thank you very much. And I just will make a comment that we do have good police present in the Mount, and I see Mark, our local constable there, who is definitely often, so I think we just need to make sure we are careful not to suggest that there aren't police around, but this is an issue that I think has been around for 30 years, and you're right bringing it to the table again, because we do need to see how we can resolve it. But I think also just recognising that the conflict of users, because some people would, with Miro Street going to one way, there's been some opposition to that as well, which is a different problem we're trying to solve. But I think so can we have an action that we continue to work on a bylaw? Is that what you were suggesting, Mahe?
Comment. I think, yeah, from what I've heard today, I think we can certainly investigate the options around what we can do. Obviously, there's this, I guess, new act coming in from central government potentially, which may solve for problems. But I think it would be a good action to do. Let's look at some of the options we could do to help in the interim. And just want to acknowledge police. You know. They've done a really good job with, you know, the bigger gatherings and making sure that a lot of those are disrupted, which is much appreciated. And I guess the comment as well to people that have these issues is report them to police, because they may not do anything, but keep reporting them, because that is how police work. When they see those complaints, that gives them the evidence that there is a problem. So it is really important that you keep reporting them, and you know, the experience I've had with police, they are very good at following up. They sometimes won't come out and say, look, we dealt with that exactly, but in their database they have a record of every complaint that's been made, and it helps inform them as to where they put their resources. So, you know, I know it's frustrating, but it's something that people need to keep reporting. Things that happen, because if they don't know about it, they can't do anything about it. And you know, that also gives us the power to follow up with them and say, Clifford, you know, we've got a real problem with boy racers. He can look in his system and say, yes, we do. We've got, you know, X amount of complaints, and helps inform their enforcement. So, you know, you're doing the right thing by reporting them, but we just need that to continue as it all happens. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for bringing the petition, Karen and Jay, and for your comments. And it is something that the community is looking for solutions to. So very keen to work with the police and with the community and with our transport team to see if we can find some things that help to curb that disruptive behaviour. So thank you very much for all joining us. And live stream's still down. Yes. And so live stream apparently has gone down, but we will be able to, we are recording and it'll be put up when it's back able to be put up. Okay, now we go to 10.1 on page 26. The status update on actions from prior City Delivery Committee meetings. And I think Craig is joining us from there.
Thank you and good morning. Look, it was the case at the last meeting and it's still the case. We have a lot of active actions in the register. However, since the last meeting we have, of the 35 listed, closed 11, 7 are pending for closure, which leaves 17 in progress. So, and we have spent some time over the last few days going through them. So in some cases where they appeared to be drifting, particularly actions from 2025, we've stepped up the requirement to action those in a prompt way. So that's a bit of a summary, if that's helpful.
Yes, and I think it was we've had a good meeting just in terms of looking at those actions, and there's a definite intention that we make this action schedule have more closed signs on it for the next meeting. So we are just looking to talk about the ones that are closed. Are there any questions on the action schedule? Councillor Crowther.
First one is probably more a comment than a question, but it's that in regards to top of page 31, where it refers to myself in a request around the layout of the CapEx budgets and things, that it says, staff will contact Councillor Crowther for discussion. So happy for anyone else to sort of override, but I've kind of given it the tick of approval. I think that it's been very helpful the way that staff have kind of changed the layout on that, so we get a better comparison. And apologies to James for taking a little while to get to my email on that. The other question was just seemed a bit strange, like the cost savings working group do not have any further meetings in the calendar. Meetings occur on an as required basis. I would have thought it would be required, and so
and I can correct that. So we are. That is something we did talk about but the paper has already been approved. So it's not a cost savings working group. It is the finance working group, and we will record and hear that change. I would also like that action to include that the finance working group has a report to each of these committees. So each meeting we have a report from the finance working group recording then any activity that they have looked at over the last 6 weeks, if that's all right with Craig and his team.
Yeah, and to add to that, the focus is on operational improvement.
Correct.
And the intention is to meet monthly.
So we are, did I get that right? Are we calling it the Operational Improvement Committee? Oh, not committee, working group.
Working group.
Okay,
correct.
great. And so is anyone not happy that then is just a report that comes to the City Delivery Committee each 6 weeks? Fantastic. Okay, so that's an update on that action. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Jen. Just two, one question and one comment. The comment's a minor one. We're spelling wharepai as warepai. So if we could just change that, that'd be good. And the action pending about our social media stuff, has that happened? Did I just miss that? Because it says we were due to receive a report. Oh, a briefing on the 30th of Jan, but I don't, maybe I wasn't here for that. Have we had that?
No, I don't think is it closed?
No, it's in pending.
Yeah, so it's pending, so it was one of the ones we talked about and said, wasn't it happened? Susan Davidson. Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, you didn't come out at all clearly then? Oh,
Take it
okay.
to account.
So I think we said that's waiting. Susan started about the same time the action was due, so we've pushed that over to Susan Davidson and the comms team to come back to us. We'll have a date for that. I think what we'll do for the next committee is commit to a date on when pending is going to be worked on. So good point raised. Thank you, Hautapu. Mayor Drysdale.
Yeah, just had a question on 10.4 on the Wharapai domain, and $9,000 I think it was to deliver the wood to Good Neighbour. I'm assuming that's the logs, and I'm just trying to understand why it would cost $9,000 to put some logs on a truck and deliver them down the road. And secondly, I guess the question is what is the action? What are we doing around that? Are we doing that or not?
Thanks for that question. I dug into that 9K myself a little. So the trees, when they're taken down, are cut into heavy, thick rings, and those rings will then have to be loaded and trucked off-site. The 9K is the total work of cutting the trees into rings and then trucking them somewhere. That whether we deliver them to Goodwood or whether we deliver them to a local yard makes no difference. The alternative would be to stack the rings somewhere for the public to collect themselves. That has HSE implications. We would otherwise have to cut it into small pieces like firewood, so it's firewood ready, which would be roughly the same cost. There's a large number of trees that are going down and a large volume to be disposed of.
And so Good Neighbour doesn't have the ability to take like logs?
No, they would need to be cut to
Rings.
sort of slices first, yes.
Okay.
We are still planning to proceed with the delivery to them in those rings rather than to a yard for the community benefit associated with that.
I guess just sensible we get a couple of quotes from wood companies to do that.
As far as I know, we've had 2, and this was the best of 2.
Okay, so no further questions. Thank you, Craig and team. So we've got a motion to receive this report. It's moved by Mayor Mahe, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you. So we're now going to page 37. Road resurfacing update, and Mike Seaborn is joining us and supported by Renaka. Welcome, Mike.
Kia ora, councillors. Just an action that we had around the chip seal and asphalt conversation we've had over the last few months. And a report brought back to you about its progress and what's happening, and a recommendation in here about a way forward. I think it's fair to say that the resurfacing program is doing quite well in terms of the intent to hit our targets for delivery this year. I guess one of the things that we're always concerned about is the weather, and that's really the main key risk for us to not hit our straps. So the point of that being is that despite having a few challenges and production issues and conversations along the way, we've managed to keep on track and we're still delivering the program that we anticipated that we needed to deliver. We've just had to rejig a few things as we've gone along. In terms of the report, it wasn't an action necessarily, but there was an ask around being able to offer the same type of approach that we did in November for the next season. And we've got a recommendation in this here around staff's view on that, which is to say that is a resource-heavy exercise, and from just a pure balancing cost versus the potential outcome, we don't favour it. One of the reasons there is it's just the very low level of support that came back through that original proposal. Understandably, that was a rushed version of life that we all, I think even our community, was a bit surprised. And so you could imagine that the uptake was reasonably low, but it was quite low, even despite that. So what we're saying there is that through the LTP process is a much more considered and structured conversation. It'll allow us to give you the right options around the implications of doing these sorts of things in terms of cost over time and the impact on your asset management program. And it'll just be a little bit more orderly in terms of the way that we can approach it as a conversation with yourselves and the community. So that's part of the main recommendation in the report, and of course some data around this. Well, I did have a quick look at some of the questions on the report earlier, and one of the ones was around the number of sites in the bottom versus the number in the table. So this is a measuring issue. In a street, we can have 3 sites. And I think what you've got in the bottom of the list is mostly the street version of life versus the sites. So we might have a cul-de-sac head or a treatment length here and there. So the differences are the 45 sites is what was planned with regard to the number of actual sites that we pay for versus the streets that we're doing those in. Now, one thing I will say, though, is our numbers are dynamic. They change and they move around. So please don't hold me to the exact number because I won't be able to be confidently able to say that. But they are in the order of magnitude correct there. And I don't think I have anything else to add there. So,
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks for that, Mike. Just reporting back on what happened. So there's a lot of angst about putting chip on top of tar seal, and a lot of streets have had that happen in the last 3 months. Have you got a bit of a feel for how it went down in the end?
Yeah, we do. So there was quite a lot of strong reaction, particularly at the beginning. And then as the program went through, there was sort of an intent to perhaps maybe we'd see some protesting or we would see some disruption to the actual construction. That didn't really materialise at all. There was 1 or 2 people that had a good conversation with our staff, but that was it, really. And then post the actual the chip seal over the asphalt, the main response we got was around loose chip. So I think the improvement that we can make moving into the next season is how do we deal with that from a customer perspective a lot better. We don't need to do this from a road sort of asset management perspective, but I think just from customers and particularly these areas, we could do better there. So that's one of the lessons we'll take into the next season. It is a little bit different because sweeping a footpath of loose chip versus a road, you need different machines or not machines. And so we just have to get better at that. So that's probably the biggest reflection we've had. We had some positive feedback, which was very pleasing. And from our perspective, it was around the feedback in that vein was the value for money angle with chip seal versus there was a recognition that that's indeed the case. But could you please just make sure you sweep up all the chip? And so we took that as actually good advice.
Thanks for the answer. Your last little bit there about how do we keep up the intensity that we actually make sure that as we go forward, it's just part of business as usual that this stuff happens?
That's a great question. One of the elements with this is, particularly now in our current economic climate, we need to look at the way we contract things. And this is a detail that I don't think we paid enough attention to during the last time we contracted. There's an opportunity now to improve that very soon, i.e. the next season, and flowing into new contracts. So that intensity you're talking about is very much in our contractors' minds. To be fair to them, they did step up and they did increase the number of people that were available to answer questions and do these things. But let's make that a BAU thing rather than a reaction to a community. So we've definitely got that in mind.
Councillor Kurak and then Councillor Schuler. On the other
Thank
side
you,
of the
Mike.
table.
So, you mentioned that there had been a request to extend the current offer to next year's season. Did that come from the community?
No, I think it was, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, it was mentioned in the discussion during the meeting. And so rather than just let it lie in the discussion, we just wanted to make sure we were clear with you that our perspective was not to go ahead with that, considering the level of resource. Yeah.
Councillor Schuler?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for this, Mike. Just a quick question. Just in terms of the feedback you get, how long is the first question quickly? How long is that bed-in period when the loose chips and that are sort of a normal part of the landscape? Generally,
about 24 to 48 hours if it's sunny, and depending on how much traffic we get. So on a lower volume road, it's going to take longer, and depending on how hot it is, and that sort of thing. So it is a stretchy piece of a rubber band, but we need traffic going over it to help bend it in as much as the rollers and whatnot, but not very long, I think is the summary answer.
you think, like, the fact that we get a lot of noise early and not dies away, that could...
Mike?
Have I gone the wrong way? Oh, sorry. You know, is there any opportunity for sort of increasing awareness or understanding or knowledge from the general public, or is that pretty well done anyway, you think? In terms of, because that's where a lot of the noise comes, I think.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a perennial problem for any road surfing crew or any agency doing it. It seems to go in surges around the level of communication organisations like ours do to teach, and then the noise sort of dies down a bit, but then it comes back again. So I think it's something that we do need to continue to do. We do offer information, but of course we can always step it up. And we took an action from the last meeting to improve our communication up front and a little bit earlier, not just right before, so that people got a sense of what to expect, including, you know, how long it takes to bed in, chip, and all that sort of thing. So that's something that we can do better at.
I definitely wouldn't have known that, so perhaps I don't read what I should read, but if we can communicate that better, I think it's a very good idea. Mayor Mahe.
Yeah, thank you. So just to put in context, I still think we should give people an option. I think the way we went about it this year was not how I would have done it, but that's fine. So my question is, if we were to do it, you know, we've got the 21 streets, surely we can have a very good guess at, you know, it's X amount of square metres that we're resealing, therefore the approximate range that we're looking at and the total cost for that street is in the vicinity of this, you know, a range with some total figures, and then say to them, you know, if you don't want your road chip sealed, then you have until the 30th of June to come to us with a proposal from your street, put the onus back on the community. If they can go and get organised and raise that money and come back to us on the 30th of June, then we should have an option for them. I don't see this as being significantly time consuming. If, you know, like if we just look at a square metre rate and then that informs a range. So is that possible, and is that, you know, I guess from a staff perspective, I just can't see how there's a huge amount of work involved in that. But, you know, what are your comments, or what is your response to, you know, whether that is possible that we do it and it doesn't take a lot of staff time, and you know, we still give that option?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think everything's possible, but it's not advisable. So one of the challenges that we have is what are we paying for? And in terms of asset management, we don't go and reseal or put chip over asphalt on potentially whole streets. Sometimes we do cul-de-sac heads, and sometimes we do parts and sections. So what we've got there is a situation where we're kind of enlisting a whole street's worth of support in order to pay for something. Is it the whole street? And it's for in our opinion, aesthetic purposes, not for asset management purposes. So we try and reduce the amount of work we do from an asset management perspective to the minimum we can get away with to hold it together in a cost-effective way. And so what that does is it changes the dynamic about how we treat the whole production process. So we'll be dealing with streets then, and then we're also dealing with those people. One of the challenges that we had, particularly in February there, was the amount of absent owners. They weren't in the country. So we weren't able to get hold of them reliably in advance of that happening. So that was another big challenge for us in terms of that delivery of that as an option. So again, it is a possibility, but I think from our perspective and running into the season next year, it's quite a challenge. In terms of this cost and staff time, we definitely acknowledge that we can do it cheaper. I mean, this was a first-time process. It was rather hurriedly done, and there's cost there that we could strip out, make it more administratively efficient. One of the things I think we came to the balancing conversation around, should we do it this season or through the RTP, was the RTP allowed us to get those sorts of ducks in a row, really ferret out some of the production issues that we would have. Plus, we've got a spectre of, what type of contracts and how are we going to go about our maintenance program in the next few years. That all came to sort of a head with, well, perhaps we just need more time to make sure we do this really efficiently.
I guess it's sending a letter out to people and telling them, come back to us if you get your community organised and can raise the money. It shouldn't take a lot of staff time, and again, it puts the onus back on our communities, but it gives them an option. I think the numbers in here, I think that's doing it the same way as you did it this year. Is that right?
I think we'll end up at a difference of opinion here with regard to that. It isn't as simple as that. And what we have to ensure is from an enlisting the community support perspective that we get enough of them to come back. So there may be some threshold, and I think this was part of the debate that we have during the past process, is how many people in the street need to agree for that to happen.
So, okay, this street costs 200,000 more. Come back to us with 200,000 from your community if you want the road to stay asphalted. They don't come back, we chip seal it. Like, we have nothing to do with it. We're putting it out there, and they've got an option. We put a date early, so it's not, it's whatever, August, September, whatever we need to know. But, the issue we had last year is it was too late and that sort of thing, and that's fine. But, I still think we want to give our community an option. If we've got asphalt in our, where we live, and we pay for it. It's just accepted.
In communities like that, where the asset management and the way that that community came together to pay for asphalt in their areas was considered over some time. And I think from the team's perspective, you offer a simple, I guess, solution and a challenge to a community to respond. And from a staff perspective, would we have the time to actually mobilise that if they came back and said a yes? And that would be challenging, but not impossible. But at the same time, what are we offering with regard to that challenge? We've got to be up for and programmed and prepared for that to be a yes and the money to come in. And that in itself presents some difficulties as well. So whilst I'm not saying we can't do it, but what I am saying is that it's challenging. And I think there are some issues there that from a perspective of doing the right thing and getting that value for money sort of situation happening and the money in the bank, we would appreciate more time to get that right and have that conversation with the community.
And I may, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to add to that as well that if there isn't immediate funding on the table, that we need to have legal funding agreements in place. That also takes time. And if there is an uptake, there is further implication about rescheduling the programme and how we catch that up in a time when we have to pre-order all of our materials used. So there are knock-on effects, whether they weigh up against offering the community a choice that is not our choice to make, but the implications on staff time are there at a time when we don't have a lot of fat in the system to deal with these things.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I just want to check. At one stage, we've been told about it was sort of a number in the thousands for the requests for information and CCM. So we've got here on paragraph 5, it only says 159 requests for information and 14 CCMs. So I'm just wondering, can you clarify, are those numbers correct, or are we talking subsets and supersets here or something? Because it's very different to thousands.
Yep, that is subsets and supersets. So when we talk to the community directly about the request and the offer, that's what we got back from the 400 people that we, the houses that we we're targeting. But there was a wider set of requests that came in around that, and repeated requests as well. So we sort of triage things in two separate ways. One's requests and information around the topic itself, and then the actual action we took on asking our community whether they were up for the offer.
So just to be clear, so there were 159 requests from the people who were being targeted in those streets, but there were thousands from, presumably some from elected members, but from people across the city who sort of heard about this and wanted information, even though they weren't going to be affected this year. Is that the correct summary?
I don't have the 1,000 number, but there were different types of data that we're presenting here. This data is presenting the information around that request.
Could we have a follow-up action just to get the number of requests for in total on that? Because I think that'd be really helpful to understand the implications. Yeah.
I've noted that.
Sorry, just to round out the Mayor's discussion there around the people that actually wanted to front with their money. I've done a bit of a calculation there. 1.8% of the people that were asked said yes. Does that sound about right?
It was in that order, yes.
So do you think that was a fair, if I'm making a decision on that basis, was it a fair sample size given the time they had to do it? Or do you think it was a short time frame and that's why we had problems? Or do you think this is going to be the same result if we had a bigger run-in?
I think that it was incredibly low. And given the reaction that we had and how it was voiced and the volume of and the intensity of those requests, I would have expected more. And indeed, I was surprised at that very low number. I had thought that we might have one or two streets get quite high, or at least have a mobilised type of a group of people who were interested and were asking their neighbours and others, as the Mayor describes, around getting on the bandwagon, if you like. But that wasn't apparent, and I think for us that was surprising. So
when the general ratepayer's paying for it, they seem receptive to it, but if it hits them in the pocket, what I take from the 1.8% is that they're not prepared to pay themselves. Is that
a question or a statement?
You want my job? Councillor Carrack.
Around the proposal for properties to fully fund a street, one glaring example to me that potentially could have been accepted by the street would be...
You're a little bit quiet, Rick.
Just move that a bit closer, excuse my voice as well. One street is Sunbury, where I consider if a survey was done in that street, in terms of the acceptance to fund the capital cost, that could have been successful because it's a very short street at the high end, beachfront, where the cul-de-sac is done in asphalt, and the very short, perhaps 100, 150 metre stretch of chip seal before then. But then in saying that, I did approach one of the owners who was tending the garden on the street, and he said, I was quite happy with it. But, to me, it's evident the quality of that chip seal product wasn't that good. So, perhaps I could be wrong. But could there be, if a similar street came up, a bit of discretion, say, well, I imagine, you might get a lot of complaint in the short stretch of high-end properties, and then just address it on an individual basis, potentially? Could that, without us forming a policy around that and formally suggesting that you progress the offer into the next season, potentially could you just have a bit of discretion around extending that offer on a case-by-case basis?
The short answer is no. But there's reasons for staff reticence with individualised responses. Our job is to systemise this process, and through that we get way more efficiency and we get a planned approach and things like that. So I guess perhaps what you're feeling is we'd like to do the best by our principles and by our production and producing a value for money product and an approach for our communities. As a whole, it kind of works well. It's these issues that kind of challenges that, because we put all our eggs in that basket of doing a systemised response. So we like to talk about being good to our customers, and I think through that process we can be. As soon as outside that process, it makes it harder and costly, and it is just different. So, you know, in a business world, perhaps the offering of products and services in a way that your customers all buy into is a simpler thing. But in our world, we have to offer you guys a choices around how do we do that and balance it up. So to your example, there are examples of communities that run their own assets and they choose what they want and they pay for it. And that's a useful thing to do. And in our world, we are trying to spread that right across a whole city and meet the challenges of a growing city in this regard. So we're not really well set up to do that.
We have got the recommendation from staff as a motion. Councillor Shaw is moving, Councillor Taylor is seconding.
Yeah,
Speak to the motion.
Yeah, well, briefly. Yeah, I understand the Mayor's comment on the opportunity that we, giving people for this one more year before we look at the long-term plan. I suppose when we made the decision and looked at it last year and then went out and did this, I know they aren't exact numbers, but as Councillor Taylor's calculator said, we had 1.8%, 8 out of the 435 that were invited to participate were interested in paying, and 0 of the streets got past any threshold. And I suppose that was in reflection and remembering that was from a fairly vocal group that brought that to us late as well. I remember at the time being invited there to look around the streets with those residents, and there were only, I think, 8 of them that were there showing us. And I certainly at that time expected, considering it appeared to be the interest, would have thought there would have been a lot more people there at that time, and there were only 8. So I sort of do think that for where we are now, I think the community has spoken, and we can listen to some of the news we got last year. Of the 435 people, 8% only chose to even respond, and then the 1.8% said they would pay. Just like with cell towers, I've sort of been cursed a bit driving around other cities and looking what's happening around the country. Auckland, through a lot of good suburbs, they're all doing the same as what we are. So I do think, I'm certainly happy to have this as something that we do look at in the long-term plan, but for the time and effort and the likely response we will get, anecdotally, admittedly, based on last year, I'm more than happy to go with the recommendations. I'd also argue with the current global uncertainty around oil and bitumen being something that comes out of that process. It's a costly exercise, full stop.
Yeah, I agree with your comments, Councillor Shaw. I'd also add a good turnout at a couple of consults that we did in Papamoa, and there were some well-reasoned arguments from the members of the public, and I think staff did a great job of working through those and listening to the population. I personally look at the final result, and if people aren't prepared to pay, I think we've just got to take the economics of this and work it through, and the long-term plan is definitely the place to deal with that, I think.
Councillor Kurak, then Mayor Mahay.
Yeah, I too will support the resolution because, in effect, the current offer is really a Clayton's offer because, I'd be surprised if any street actually took up the offer, and I think through this 10-year plan we developed a meaningful offer that would be potentially accepted by some streets. It's the way forward.
Me Mahe.
I agree the long-term plan is the right place to do this in earnest. However, in the interim, we're excluding the streets that are having an opportunity to have their streets resurfaced in the next year. I don't agree with not giving those streets a choice, so therefore I'll vote against this. I think that we owe everyone an opportunity. We've heard it's unlikely to be taken up. I'm very happy to put the onus back on these communities and take away the staff time by effectively alerting them to them and basically saying come back when when you've got your community on board and you're prepared to fund that. I think it's a no lose situation for us because we're giving people the option if they want to take it up. Then we have to enable that, but we can do some very high level numbers. We can give them that opportunity, and if they don't take it up, then there's no additional staff time. But if they do wish to take it up, yes, it may be Clayton's choice, but ultimately, I still believe that we should give our community the opportunity to have what they wish on the road. Very happy that they have to pay for it. That's the way forward. Chip seal is a fit for purpose surface, and I have no issue with that. And if you want a high level of service, then you're going to have to pay the difference. So look, I'm going to vote against this because I just disagree that we should give our community, and I believe we can. What we've heard today is all the reasons why we shouldn't give our community a choice, because it is a bit harder for staff, but nothing that I've heard that says that changes my mind that we shouldn't give people an opportunity, and it can be achieved cheaply and without a huge amount of time from our staff.
Councillor Crowther.
I think the self-funding option as we presented it was, as I said, whenever we decided to do that, designed to fail. It's just, it is a setup for our community. You're never going to get buy-in, and I think it's just a complete waste of staff time to do that again. And I'm still not sure exactly how much staff resource was used, but certainly directly there was a significant amount, but it sounds like indirectly there was a lot more. So I don't think it's any point doing that because it's not the option our communities want. I've had so many conversations with people around the city around this, and they do not want that option. The targeted rate is the viable option, so I will still oppose one part of this, if we could take it in parts, please, Madam Chair, because I'd rather we dealt with this issue in the annual plan. Like, to me, it's not that complex, and to quote a well-known mayor, we're kicking the can down the road, and I don't think we need to do that. It's actually quite straightforward. But the biggest issue for many people that I've spoken to is the NPV calculations, and that's what TCC used to set the charge and what will continue to be used as a basis. And I would respectfully suggest that TCC does not seem to fully understand NPV calculations, so I'd like to request formally a request, and I've done it informally with Craig, and work through the NPV calculations and invite anyone else who has an interest in this to do that, because I think this has impacted a number of TCC projects. It causes significant costs to our community that are unnecessary, and people don't understand the implications. So we've said the NPV is 6.2, the PRRA says 1.3. I think it's actually around 3, and I've gone to financial experts around that, and I'll be really interested in what our new financial expert thinks. It is a technical issue, it's a specialist issue. It's not pointing fingers at any staff or anything, because they're tasked with doing their roles, but I think there's a conceptual issue, and it's on us as governance, not as staff, to get this sorted. And I think we've let it sit for too long. So that's my biggest takeaway, is forget about this one issue. This has implications across the city.
Renaka, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, could I make a small correction to that? The charges that we asked our residents to contribute to maintain the option of asphalt on their streets was not informed by NPV. That was simply the cost of the contracted works to that street. Apart from that, the MPV calculation is part of a decision whether it is a better option or not, and that will be part of the LTP engagement as decided on by Council in November.
Can I clarify? My comment was in regard to the information shared by TCC to people in Papamoa who've got MPV calculations. I'm not sure how they got them, but they were provided by Tauranga City Council staff, and so that's led to discussions, meetings, etc. And so that's the basis for it. And of course, as an elected member, I also then asked for information, so I've sort of seen those calculations. So it's more that's like I say, it wasn't the issue of funding the particular streets because no one was ever going to do that, or apart from, 8 people who would have done it as a protest.
Okay, we've got the motion on the table. It's now up on the board. We'll take it in part. So it receives the report 2025-26 roads resurfacing update. All those in favour? Can you raise your hands when we're doing these, please? So that is carried. B, confirms that a property owner self-funding option to retain asphalt surfacing will not be offered as part of the 26-27 resurfacing program. All those in favour? And against? So that is carried. Resolves that the 26-27 resurfacing program be delivered at a standard service in accordance with existing asset management practices and approved funding settings. Are we voting on this on the basis that one lost? We are, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. So all those in favour? And against? No, it's not. So, Councillor Crowther, Councillor Kurak. Mayor Mahe didn't. Are you abstaining?
Just trying to understand.
Yeah. My understanding is if we've carried one, then 2 has to be the case. Yeah. And C. This is notes that any future consideration will be considered through the long-term plan. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you. So we're now going to change to the supplementary open agenda. Page 44? No, that's 39.
It's just 44 of the supplementary agenda.
Oh, so there's 2 supplementaries.
It's just the supplementary
Oh,
agenda.
it's page 4.
Yeah.
Not, yeah. Okay, not what it says. My notes say page 44 and there's only 39.
Sorry, my mistake. Yeah.
And it's 10.10, right?
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Is that a typo?
It's 10.3. It should be 10.3, yeah.
Okay. Are we having Catherine and Tracy and Cherie and Susan and Craig joining us? Yeah. It's good, isn't it?
Did you see that proposed resolution, additional resolution from?
I did, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So there's quite a lot of complexity in this report, so we've sought to distill some of the key messages and insights into this slide pack, which we'll move through. we've, in the spirit of continuous improvement, we've started thinking about the financial reporting in different ways. So the first initiative is that we are going to migrate to monthly summary form financial reporting for elected members, certainly by year end, so we're working on that now. The other aspect that we've thought about is how to seek to demystify some of the deep technical concepts associated with financial reporting. This slide unpicks, if you like, the drivers of variance in the year-to-date performance versus the annual plan budget. And so you can see there's 5 broad categories, that each of which is playing a role in variances. So the first of those is the timing of delivery, especially around the capital program, and the associated impact, particularly on interest costs. The second one that's already been mentioned today and is becoming both significant and pervasive is what's happening in the global markets, both in economic terms and geopolitical terms, and so that's now clearly impacting a number of key aspects of financial performance. And the ones we've called out here are impact on interest rates, fuel costs, and the price of materials, but more broadly, I think, supply chain impacts, which goes both to availability, timing, and cost. The third category is what we're seeing around demand and activity levels. So economic conditions have slowed. That's showing up in several places across Council's activity base, but particularly a slowing in activity around building consents at the airport, less landings, but interestingly higher utilisation on the planes that do land, so there's some offsetting dynamics there and the associated parking implications. One-off events, we're obviously still navigating the January weather event and the early vesting of the Papamoa East Interchange to NZTA. We'll come on to in more detail, but it actually has a $63 million impact, which is very significant. And accounting standards, so there's a few items there. I understand the finance lease associated with this building has been discussed historically, but that's still an issue to consider. The timing of items that can be capitalised, and depreciation is another matter that we'll revisit later in this presentation around a review, I think a needed review, and also consideration of the impacts. So with all that said, I'll pass to Catherine.
Kind of just a very brief overview before we get into some of those technical figures. And the year-to-date results are favourable to the annual plan, and they do reflect Council being very conscious of its budgets and its expenditure. But calling out that in response to last year in particular, we have really focused on ensuring that some of those adjustments that come towards year end as part of producing an annual report that we're trying to get onto early and highlight for you. So you're seeing that in the forecast where a favourable 9-month result is producing, instead of a surplus, a deficit at year end, primarily because of, in this case, the PEI vesting, but it's just recognising some of those, what we've traditionally put through as accounting entries, and just saying that's going to be part of the story to tell. Next year's annual plan has incorporated most of those favourable trends and costs, so insurance costs next year reflect the lower insurance prices we paid this year. And we have looked through all those trends and trying to reach that desired 7.5% rates increase, so that has been incorporated. But noting the preparation for year end, including capitalisation depreciation, continues to throw up some surprises for us, or areas that we can see we need to improve our processes. And that is right from the asset management process for each of the activities, through how we deal with the revaluation information, and our project planning, and the extent to which we disaggregate when we're doing projects, the kind of assets that are being created. And so we are saying that we will commence a review and report back some process improvements and just how those things all interrelate, with a view to getting much sharper depreciation budgets through into the long-term plan. I'll just pass over to Tracy for some of the detail.
Good morning. So just moving into that detail, essentially to summarise some of those very big tables. Our year-to-date results are favourable to the annual plan. Both operating revenue and operating expenditure are favourable quite considerably. However, the operating revenue being so much higher than annual plan is pretty unusual, and it does go back to one very specific thing, which is the early receipt of bulk developer contributions for Tauriko West. The lower operating costs are very widely spread across the organisation. There are some lumpier areas in stormwater, digital, planning and transport. Some of those could be timing related, a little bit difficult to tell at this stage, but they do more than offset unexpected expenditure, particularly that related to the January weather event. As noted, depreciation is one of our problems this year. It is higher than annual plan at the 9-month mark by $6.6 million, and that does include the non-funded accounting entry for the finance lease. That's about $2 million at the 9-month stage. In terms of surpluses year to date, before gains and losses, we're $25 million favourable to the annual plan, which includes that Tauriko West.
Sorry, Tracy, does this, having read the paper quite well, can you point us to where this is in the paper, just so we can go back to where we are, please?
This goes back to the first page of the report, which has a summary table on surpluses and deficits. Excuse me. So yes, $25 million favourable to the annual plan at a $52 million surplus. That does have a very pleasing effect on our balanced budget, which is at 107% against the annual plan of 98.3. Excluding asset revenues, we're favourable to annual plan by $42 million at this stage. We have had quite a close look at forecasting for the end of the year, and we're forecast to be unfavourable to the annual plan, so this is where it starts to bite due to some revenue delays that we've seen with the IAF and our user fee revenues being lower in some areas, particularly the airport with landing charges and parking, and also actually in the parking activity as well, and in some of those regulatory activities. Forecasts for expenditure are, for the remaining 3 months, largely on plan. There is some risk that that increased expenditure will not occur. We always have that weather risk, for example. The deficit before tax, just to reiterate what Catherine was saying, will be enormously impacted at the end of the year by the vesting of the PEI. So these kind of things are the big swings that we generally see at the end of the year. We're trying to bring them to you earlier. Also, if you look at attachment 1, there is quite a big section on other gains and losses as they are at the moment. It's quite a complex area. Currently, there's a gain, but that could quite easily swing round to a loss in the upcoming 3 months, depending on the markets.
So just to reiterate the point at the beginning, our operational performance is favourable to budget. The organisation has done really well at managing its expenditure. The accounting losses are what will bring through, the accounting arrangement associated in particular with the PEI vesting will bring through what looks like poor performance or a loss if you were not aware that, but it's the vesting out of assets that were sitting on our balance sheet comes through that financial performance report as a loss. And so we just, it isn't a reflection on the organisation's performance. It's an accounting mechanism. And just to note that those assets that are vesting out were initially paid 51% by NZTA, and they're going to form part of the state highway network. The advantage to council of vesting it out, of course, is that we do not need to depreciate it and repair it. So it's not a bad thing to be vesting those assets either. So that's really, so the other thing that is affecting the results is the additional expenditure we've had, the non-cash accounting entries, which have come from the 90 Devonport Road financial lease arrangement. They do not affect the underlying performance and rate surplus. The expenditure on the weather event is paid for through the risk reserve, so it does not require use of rates that we collected this year, and the additional impact of having to report a financial lease is just a non-cash accounting entry. So that the rate surplus that we identified last week that can underlie funding for the annual plan next year does remain within that forecast. So I'm sure you'll have questions, and there is an element of technical difficulty in what we're trying to get across there. So just now we'll just pass to Susan. Oh.
Sorry, we'll pause there because before we move on to the capital program, I think, because that was quite a lot of information quite quickly. One thing I was going to add is that obviously we hard close at year end, but to reflect the importance of having the surplus at year end, we've done a form of soft close at the end of March. So we've made more effort to flush out the unexpected cost items in particular. So there is some rigour around the forecasting for the final 3 months in that regard.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you. I do find it quite difficult, having taken quite a long time looking at the report, then having 4 slides of good information that I then have to say, how does that relate back to the report? So happy they do come, but I would like more that the table, when I did stop you, Tracy, actually did refer to a table we have got, but otherwise it's just a little bit hard. If I don't think you did these this morning, so if we'd had these on Friday night, that would have been very useful, please. I'm also just going to start, I have got lots of questions, but I am going to ask if going forward the purpose of the report can be changed, and this is going to be on any report that comes to any of my committees, that the purpose is to provide an update, but also to highlight any significant changes since the last report and highlight opportunities and risks that should be considered. And I think we're not giving ourselves the breadth to say what's changed and therefore what does governance need to have a view on, or let's actually make sure we're always being innovative and thinking about outside the box and looking at opportunities as well as obviously reporting on risks. So that's something that as an action I'm going to ask, and there's about 6 papers that is a good thing to have on here. So I will open the floor to questions. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Craig, how do we, sorry, I'll start again. We've been through a lot of agony in the last 18 months since we turned up, and we've pressured the organisation to make lots of savings, and it tells me at the baseline it probably is doing that. But when we look at our reporting, I think it's really crucial that we actually get these big elephants like the PEI, put them somewhere else for the moment while we savour the work that's been done and the result we've achieved, and make it very, very clear so the public understands that all the cost savings that have been driven through a lot of hard work over the last 2 years actually get it acknowledged. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think we can identify unexpected / extraordinary / abnormal items, and as you say, carve them out. I'm also keen to, and we discussed this as a finance team, have a sharper focus on cash flow and cash position, which, as everyone around the table understands, removes the distortion of accounting treatment. So, you know, in the end, if a business understands cash coming in and cash going out, it won't get into too much trouble because it's real. And I think we need to re-emphasise the importance of cash at a time when there are all sorts of external and internal pressures. So I'm a big fan of that, and it's part of what we're migrating to. And as I said earlier, not only quarterly updates like this, but doing it monthly so that you're equipped with the latest information as soon as we possibly can.
Sorry, my second question relates to the PEI thing. Did we have that as a something on the horizon in next year's budgets? Was that already in the system to divest?
It isn't now in the annual plan, but it was originally expected to happen next year. So.
Me Mahe.
Yeah, so my question is, obviously, there's a couple of items, the vesting from Tauriko, the vesting to NZTA. So my question is, have we taken that into account? And so does that therefore significantly change our annual plan budget next year?
So they've all been taken into account in the annual plan budget that you have seen, that we've been reporting through March and April.
Okay, that's great.
Right, yeah.
And then secondly, I'm just on the PEI. So we're saying we're making a loss of 62. Was it? Sorry, no. The PEI is 63, but I think our deficit is 62 million. So am I taking that we're making a technical surplus of about 1 million if you take out the PEI?
Yes, based on this. We also have not included a full year forecast for mark to market, which is the other thing that throws us out in terms of our swap values, and so they could swing either way, of course, and they have all year. So that will be an additional number. But yes, underlying it, we are performing better on our operational results and continue to expect that we will. The main thing that's driven, and in the table we tried to show you the different lines of surplus because it's very confusing. But what you'll get at year end will be the operating surplus before gains and losses and that surplus deficit before tax. In that operating surplus before gains and losses, we haven't received so much capital subsidy or vested assets as we had budgeted. So those things also contributed to that kind of deficit or poor performance at that level.
So I guess just to follow up, because that was one of the clear things that we made we wanted to make sure that we are making effectively technical surpluses. So we are paying for our daily expenses every year. So we are doing that under this budget. Yeah.
So just, I have got a number of questions. You have seen some of them because some of them I've made public and others I haven't. Quite a lot are just about how we can make the reporting a little bit clearer for us to read, and I'm not going to go through those, but hopefully we can as part of the efficiencies working group. I am going to suggest that we need a date when we can do the depreciation review, and I know we've got a potential addition to the depreciation resolution, so I'll come back to that. I'm just going to go through and see, are there any other questions or are you otherwise all right? Okay, I'll see how many I need to ask. You going? Oh, do you want to go, Glenn? No, I'm finding which ones I'm going to answer that I need to do here.
I'll ask. Can you just decode? I just don't understand this one thing with depreciation, where it says that it's significantly ahead of the annual plan because of the impact of prior year capitalisation and additional capitalisation of assets in the current year, largely spaces and places and transport. So we deliver less. Yeah, can you just explain it? Because we deliver less assets last year, we deliver less assets this year than expected. We planned, there was quite a discussion last year saying we wanted to take a bit of a precautionary approach to depreciation, so don't underestimate it. But we seem to have underestimated it. I'm just trying to understand what that is actually saying.
So firstly, just in the context of what's changed since last report, we have not changed our depreciation over budget forecast since the 6-month result. We're not expecting any more, but you know, it's a risky thing to say as we dig into the detail. What had happened that we mentioned at the 6-month level is that there was work in progress, particularly sitting in spaces and places from previous years that had not been looked at for capitalisation, and so we had missed that in our budgeting, and so when it was capitalised, it was an unfavourable surprise. And there is also that 2.7 million of accounting change. So there's a projection of about 6.6 million overspend. 2.7 million of that is just an accounting entry because we have to treat the 90 Devonport Road as a finance lease, and so therefore we have to identify some hypothetical depreciation. So that we hadn't budgeted to treat it as a finance lease, so that was part of it. And then the other part was, just as we dig into that work in progress, finding a group of assets that needed to be capitalised that we had kind of missed in the planning process and had not got capitalised in time. So the team has worked really hard this year and continues to work hard to year end, getting through a very big list of capital items that are sitting in work in progress. And so that's when we did discover this time that there is some anomalies between what we've got as effectively our depreciation rates and what is our sensible depreciation rates. Where we have renewals, we should actually be in the finance system making sure there's no base depreciation charged on those, and then charging depreciation on the renewals for new assets. So there's a few things that aren't quite flowing from our asset management systems through to our finance systems, which is what we're having to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah, you go.
Okay. My other question was for Marty. Like, just seeing on page, 9, that it's got the up-to-date expenditure for the MOA response, for the response and recovery phases. And certainly, like the physical works, 640,000 or something, it's all itemised out if anyone in the public's interested. But the part I was going to ask about was the security, because I've had quite a bit of feedback myself asking whether council could actually look at more cost-effective ways to provide that security, because we've spent so far $500,000 on that and 305,000 in the recovery phase only. And the view from some in that community, some of the sort of community leaders and business people and so on, is what about if they actually can step up as a community and take care of some of that. So do it through multiple approaches, to do it through physical people on site, but also having, harnessing all the shops there, various other things that could be done, because there's a view there that we're a bit overly heavy on the security spend and could spend that money more effectively, cost effectively in other areas, saying that they think we're treating them a bit like we need to build a prison, whereas we need to, in their view, maybe just educate them a bit better.
Thank you, Councillor. That's something we can look at. I'm happy to pick that up with Charlie and work through the options. It might also dovetail into the work that Amanda's doing with WSP about changing the containers, the liner containers, to some other sort of physical structure or bunding, and so it might dovetail in with that work also.
You appreciate that, and I think that the suggestions have included, Rotary Lions, Surf Club, people throw out ideas. What's going to be viable, I don't know, but definitely to take an innovative, cost-effective approach would be much appreciated.
And I'll just actually add to that, we have had a number of community members suggesting that if we are changing the containers to something else, are we adding something a little less prison-like, as Councillor Crowther talked about. So can you please take that on as well, that we should have that conversation before a decision is made and we just suddenly see that change? That would be good. While on the cost of the response, so we heard, I think at Ngāpō that some of the response costs will be out of operation, but some will be out of reserve. Can we just, where is that sitting, please?
So in the table, all the costs sitting in the table are planned to be funded from the risk reserve, and that is just sufficient to cover that level of costs over the 2 years. I'm not aware of other costs. Obviously, things that are sitting in that placeholder from the earlier report in March. There was a placeholder in next year's annual plan within the capital space of 6 million to look at recovery, so that would not be funded from the risk reserve, that would be funded by loan.
But that means that none of the January response costs impact what the annual plan that we're working to for this year. But I think in some of the variance analysis it's been included, and I thought if we're paying it out of reserves, then it shouldn't be included.
It's the difference between funding and expenditure. So we must recognise all the expenditure. Of
course, yeah.
But when we talk about the rate surplus, that's when it comes through.
Okay. Just in terms of 90 Devonport, we get so many, it comes up in every single report, something different about how that's treated. Could we just get a one-pager on how it's treated and where we're seeing it, and the numbers by quarter that we're going to see and which lines, so that we can always refer back to that when that's reported, please? The other thing this is on page 20, just the arts and culture, 4 million received from the art gallery, offsetting grant expenditure. Can we understand what that is, please? That some of these were a little bit difficult because I don't know whether they've already been reported and therefore been explained, or these are new. So again, if we're getting year-to-date new stuff, would be good to have in red or something that we can tell what they are, if that's possible.
The payment for the art gallery, the work around the door was kind of started to be reported last year, and this was a payment received with that work, associated with that work, which I think has mainly been presented through the capital project. Is that correct? It will be last year, but yes, I can give you a summary of that. I don't have that to hand, but
that's in the other revenue variance analysis.
Yes, because
it will this year.
It will come through as revenue this year, but it related to that work that was largely done last year and just finished off this year, and the art gallery was going to pay a portion of that, so that's just that share coming back in of that work that was done.
Thank you. On, just a question on, keeps jumping out at me, 21, where you've talked about the summer period sees a lot of leave taken, which has charged the leave liability account rather than personnel expenses. Surely if a person takes their leave in a current year, that is a cost to personnel. This is only if it's accrued, and I didn't understand that. And it seemed a lot, 1.5 million explained as leave taken in January seemed a lot.
Just to address your last point first, it's actually not a lot. There is always a big swing in the first quarter of the year. The way we account for salaries, there is actually an expense code that you never see related to leave, to accruals. The accrual in the balance sheet increases usually every month.
Yep, I understand how it goes.
And when
Yep.
leave is taken, it is debited against that account.
And I've got a couple of questions on depreciation, which I will hold till we're talking through depreciation. The other comment, just in terms of all of these variance analysis, it's quite hard to understand you're saying 1.2 million in personnel, which is 130 million is not very much, but on some of these other ones, it's quite hard to tell, is that a 5% or is that a 0.5% of the total that we're doing as a variance? Because we're seeing 0.8s reported and then sort of 3.6s, so it's quite hard to understand the significance. Again, back to my report request that we know what the significance of these are. I won't go through all those, but I will with you separately if that's all right. Oh, except the 9.4.27, 9.4 million losses on disposal. Can we understand what that, page 62? That's quite a big chunky number.
There's a mixture of items in there. I'm just struggling to remember some exact examples. It includes such items as demolition of existing assets to make way for new construction, writing down of assets to reflect ownership or end-of-life disposal. And there's some minor asset sales in there as well. I think one of the, I'm not sure if it's one of the bigger items, but in terms of the number of transactions that went through, one of the items that caught my eye was when we disposed of a lot of the IT equipment when it was replaced through that program. I'm not suggesting that there was a large loss on that. I'm just saying that there was a lot of transactions when I looked at it.
And I'm just making the point that 9.4 million is 3 times what we are asking for as a cost saving for next year in the annual plan. And I think it's, if it's part of that's related to the swap out of our laptops, we got a full accounting treatment of the fact that that was a good thing to do because we weren't losing money. So if we're losing quite a lot on that, then we'd like to know about it. So can we have a breakdown of that, please? And I think just, Craig, please take away, if you're putting, it's 0.27, but it's a $9.3 million loss without any specifics. We should be knowing about if there are those sort of losses happening when we are demolishing existing assets that I don't recall we have been told we're demolishing any existing assets for a wee while anyway. So So I will take my other questions to the Finance Committee to save my team. They've seen all my purples showing on the side. Councillor Roseboom.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, this is a question that's sort of bugged me for a while. It's been revolving around. It's on vested assets. When developers do their development and they return it to us, what's the process by which the developer says, here you go, council, here's everything. The open green space that's vested back to council, what's the process that's taken to get it onto our books and onto our asset sheet? Because it seems a little bit clunky at the moment. How's it actually achieved? Because you've mentioned it twice, it's come up in other committees in the past. Do they actually give us a bunch of map references, or how do they do it?
There is a kind of a physical kind of asset piece of this, which isn't our area. But when it comes to us, we get if it's a construction, we get the as-built. It is entered into our asset management system. It becomes part of our financial record. We then obviously maintain it, depreciate it. But it is very dependent on getting that information from the developer. It's almost impossible to forecast with any accuracy. You have some very wide bands of expected timing, effectively.
Yes.
And also area, because in the year after I got elected, many of the lakes people were pointing out, we don't own that, that's yours. When I point out spaces and places or city ops, they go, oh, we thought that was theirs. So there's not a very clear definition of who owns what when the developer pulls out, because they'll develop 100 hectares, for example, and they might utilise 80 of it, but they don't clearly define the 20 that's left that's vested back to council. So we need to develop a better process of identifying that.
Yes, it will be included in the asset systems and on the GIS layers, so it should be quite specific and the documentation should be specific and usually is. So, but yeah, we can kind of maybe give you some examples when we put back on the review.
Yeah, and I will acknowledge that City Ops still occasionally finds something that is ours. The asset management system needs to be reviewed in line with the depreciation system that Catherine and I have agreed on.
Okay, that being the end of the questions, thank you very much, the finance team, for your report.
We're still in process, regrettably.
We're doing capital.
Yes, so I'll pass to Susan to my right to cover off this slide.
Morning, everyone. So capital delivered to the end of the third quarter was $281 million, a bit behind where we were this time last year. And it's also reflected in the full year forecast of $405 million. That's against the adopted annual plan budget of $502 and the revised budget of $453 million this year. Noting that was based on March forecast information at the time of writing this report. Rephasing is currently underway for the 2026 financial year. It's effectively our final push to preempt any more of those carry forwards and firm up what's going to be delivered as part of the 2027 annual plan. Outcomes of this rephasing and any other required changes to the program will be reported back to Council on the 26th of May. Just calling out one of the significant project timing changes noted in this report. So the Civic Whare Exhibition and Museum project, or CWEM, it's progressing ahead of schedule. An updated forecast indicates that 10.1 mil bring forward into the 2026 financial year is required to secure facade materials and mass timber. The bring forward is proposed under CE delegation and will be partly offset by rephasing other major projects. The debt impact is, however, expected to be fully offset by a contingency release associated with the Library and Community Hub project, subject to Te Manotaki o Te Papa board approval next month. And also just calling out that there's some capital project write-offs noted in this report, so around $4.8 million of capital work in progress will be expensed as operating costs, mainly from cancelled or deferred transport projects resulting from changes to the government policy statement on land transport. these write-offs will require future rates-funded debt repayment, resulting in an annual rates impact of $236,000 over the next 10-year period. And we will, of course, get into a bit more detail on capital delivery in the next section.
Councillor Crowther.
I'll start with the last one. I guess I'm struggling to understand why the transport decision has been made. To me, like my logic, and you can correct it, is that these projects will almost certainly, I would hope, based on my conversations with the transport team, deliver lots of benefits to our community in future years. It may take a change of government in a couple of cases, but may not. And I'm just sort of thinking, if we're making the current people pay now, that just seems wrong. Like the whole basis of using debt is to spread that so that beneficiaries of those projects will pay when they're living in town, not maybe before they leave town, and then they'll get no benefit. I'm just wondering how that decision is made, whether it's a transport decision or a finance decision, and how that kind of relates to that principled approach that I've always thought we took as a council, which is to try and attribute it to the people who will benefit from those.
I think it's a bit of both, is that these projects have been deferred way out beyond the current LTP period.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
We wouldn't get away with audit of being able to leave those costs sitting in our work in progress, because some of those costs we are going to have to relitigate feasibility studies or the design based on what that looks like in 10 years' time. It may not necessarily look the same. So this is why we are proposing that we repay that debt over a 10-year period, so we're not just hitting everyone in the current financial year.
So just for clarity, that work was funded by loan, continues to be funded by loan. Had it been incorporated into an asset, the depreciation of the asset, the depreciation reserve would be what repaid the loan, because it's not being incorporated as an asset. And actually, in a number of these cases, I think we've become more better in our approach to budgeting. So we would now not budget a lot of that business case work as CapEx, which is what had happened. We would budget as loan-funded OPEX. So the outcome is exactly the same. And the extent to which there's still value in the work that's been done, it will still be there and able to be used. It's an accounting process that we're unlikely to be able to just leave these things for 10 years sitting as work in progress in a balance sheet. But the actual effect on ratepayers is no different, because it's loan-funded OPEX and should actually have initially been budgeted as such.
Yeah, I guess quick follow-up is, I guess there's two issues that come from that. One is, I mean, I thought if we put them in the LTP and we put them in programmed in, that would still be eligible. So maybe you can clarify that. And the other is, when you look at, for instance, the CWEM, we now seem to be taking a different approach to what what the public was told at the time, which is that master planning costs and concept design costs were incorrectly allocated to this capital project. It was explicitly said at the time by the commissioners they would be part of that project. So now we're retrospectively pulling it out. And is that for the same reason? Is there sort of like a change in approach by council or by audit, NZ, to say no longer can you plan for projects and capitalise them? Because in that case, it's actually being built right now.
I'm not responding to the detail of the things that have been written off, but there have always been accounting rules about what you can capitalise in the terms of design and planning and what you can't. And you need to get to a level of detail that relates to the asset finally formed. So option analysis, community consultation are never capitalised. They'll always be written back to OPEX. So as I was saying, what we try to do now is, when there's a project, identify the project with some aspects that will always be identified as OPEX, just so that the budgeting flows through more clearly.
The other part of the question is, has there been a change, like in terms of sort of why we can't, if we've put something in the LTP, or if we will put something in the LTP, that it will not be allowed to be passed by Audit New Zealand? Is that what I've heard?
typically not for that length of time. If it's sitting 10 years out, no, we wouldn't ordinarily hold anything in WIP for beyond 3 or 4 years.
And I guess my question on that is that if this was previous year, why are we only finding out about it now?
So we have a very strong team that's doing a lot of work in that work in progress space and commenced doing that through last year and this year, so are starting to pull out areas and raise those questions about them. So it's just as they've got to the work, they've identified it. We have resourced up that team, and that was in response to an Audit New Zealand recommendation.
Just from me, firstly, thank you very much for the table setting out what we started with the annual plan capital and what we've got to now. Very useful. I would really like to know, as notes to the table, the 68 million that council have apparently taken out deferred on the budget, just as notes to say which council meetings, because I can't recall when we agreed to defer 68 million. It's quite a big number. And also just on debt, quite a lot of tables we get on debt, but just a table every meeting that said this is what we started with, this is things that have changed, and this is what we are forecasting to end with would be really useful, please, and not change that, but have another quarter, so it'd have the 4 quarters, just would be really useful. On Stella, your lovely waterfall chart is quite hard to read what all the bits are, so just those 2 comments or questions from me. Any other questions? Councillor Kurak.
Thank you. Earlier this morning and also last week, the council meeting, I shared some proposed resolutions around the funding of depreciation. So just before I propose it to the committee, would there be any fundamental objection to that, or was anything in there that you would sort of have a concern with in terms of including in the upcoming review?
Just as a general rule, in terms of Local Government Act and the kind of prudence requirements, the idea is that you fund depreciation on assets that you expect to have to renew. So in the past, council has specifically chosen for whatever reason, for a specified reason, not to fund depreciation. So examples to my mind are the athletics track and the Bay Park Stadium. But both of those became assets that the community did expect to have renewed, and so it's just being very clear when the reasons why, and that would be subject to audit. So it's not something that the staff would say, oh, let's not fund that. So staff follow a process of here's the asset, here's its value, here's expected useful life, that's prudent depreciation, and then what are other factors, and council may choose not to fund. Just as we choose not to fund 51% of transport on the basis that NZTA has traditionally, and we hope into the future continue to fund a portion of our renewals. But I'm just conscious that we had just a final presentation on the debt, if you'd like to hear that before completion.
It's just my question more was pitched around the quantum of workload to provide some of that detail that I'm requesting in terms of capacity of your team to provide that, include that in the review.
At a very high level, we have the property, plant and equipment summary from a financial perspective, and can probably go down a few details into the kind of assets. And I think for the most part, they wouldn't be ones you'd be, I'm not sure what your perspective on not funding depreciation is, but from that you may be able to identify large assets that you want to have a conversation about.
And I think also, if I can continue, just around the policy,
louder, Rick.
just to, sorry?
You're a bit quiet.
Oh, thank you. Thank Okay, I'll speak up a bit.
Yes, please.
So also to include some policy, the rationale within the depreciation policy, if that actually exists, and procedure, if you can cover a bit of that off. It's just to get, for us as a council, to get a stronger understanding of that policy around depreciation funding, to include that. I'll raise it later and I'll see how it goes. Thank you.
I thought I got away with it. So just from a Treasury perspective, the forecast on balance sheet debt for Q3 is 1.51 billion. That's $10 million higher than it was forecast in Q2. And that is purely timing of the capital program and grant funding coming in before 30th of June. Total debt, including off-balance sheet debt, which is the IFF debt, is forecast to be 1.61 billion. Our average cost of borrowing, including margins, is 3.96%. So we're seeing a bit of a benefit that's come down since Q2. We're seeing a benefit from our floating portion of our book. As the OCR has been held, every 3 months we have a rates reset, so we're seeing more and more benefit of that come through. A big thing on the agenda for Treasury and the finance team in general is our annual credit review in May. So Standard & Poor's will be here to meet with the Mayor, the CEO, the CFO and the finance leadership team. The focus will be on debt. It will be on waters reform. They also have a big focus on our revenue and the general economy as well in Tauranga. That's all from a Treasury perspective, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I just had one. You talked about the variability from interest rate swaps, but then later, I think in here you say, but we've effectively fixed our rates till the end of the year. I was then confused that where the variability is.
70% of our current debt is fixed.
Yep.
30% of that is still floating. So we see the volatility through that 30% floating amount. The swaps are very susceptible to the long end of the swap curve, so they're kind of like 5 to 10 year swap rates. As an example, in Q1 we had a $10 million loss, and now in Q3 we've got a $10 million gain.
That's what I saw, yes.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
that is purely that long end of the swap curve being really volatile during this geopolitical time. The $10 million gain that we've got at Q3 could be completely eroded by Q4 depending on what happens in the next few months.
Thank you. Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, question for Craig. Are you able to email us on the 28th of May with the answer to this question to Standard & Poor's in regards to contingent liability? They've stated semi-publicly that dominant councils and a multi-council CCO with significant influence over strategy and decision-making will have a particular approach to the debt, which means that it'll be on our books. And for regional multi-council CCOs with multiple owners, that they will, quote, consolidate water debts, and then for water care, they're saying that's an exception because of legal status there. So I guess taking it at face value, you know, the question is, are we dominant? And in the one workshop that I attended online, it became quite there were Q&As around it, but it's a bit unclear to me because I suspect we are, but I think it'd be really helpful to get that explicit because I presume they will have a view on it because they seem to be very forthcoming with their views in general. But I think we're in that area where we're not a regional multi-council with more than two. So it's just to clarify that if that is going to work for you.
Absolutely. The slight conundrum we have that Martin's very aware of is the two classes of shares, and so on the one hand there are equal voting rights, and on the other hand we'll have a much greater equity interest.
They did, or through the chair, they did make it clear in the workshop I attended that that was probably not the significant factor. They were going to look through a whole lot of stuff, but it was to see at a very practical level whether a council had significant, significant influence over strategy and decision making. That was sort of what they said was the criteria, which did sound quite subjective in one way, but I think I know what my answer would be, but I'm interested in what theirs would be.
Well, I think if there are equal sort of voting and decision rights, then I think it's not that TCC alone has a dominant position. I think the two owners have to collectively agree around strategy and decisions. So, yeah, it'll be, as Sheree said, it will be a major topic on the 27th, and we'll need to work through it.
Okay, I can now say thank you very much.
Sorry, not
no,
quite.
not yet.
The final slide deals with next steps. So look, it's just to confirm, and I think, Madam Chair, you were looking for a date for this review, depreciation review.
Yep. Well, actually, I just want to let you know that we don't want to have, we set a date and you come with a final proposition. I think there's a lot of discussion around this table, and we would like to workshop a few options before there's a final decision made, so we can understand it and we can be more proactive in terms of that decision.
Yeah, so we can say at the moment we'd be targeting August for that.
Great.
Yeah, and then there's just some other steps, closely monitoring OPEX and capital, confirming the capital rephasing and carry forwards, and the monitoring report that will come back to this committee after Q4.
So do we take those as actions? Or that's just promises that we haven't got that slide, so we can't go back and say you promised? Are you happy that's an action?
Yes.
Yep,
that's
great,
fine.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to move this motion that the City Delivery Committee receives the report, Q3 Financial Monitoring Report, and agrees that a full review of depreciation processes and options should be I was just going to change a little bit of the wording. Should be undertaken and brought back to this committee in a workshop by August 2026. Yeah, brought back to the City Delivery Committee as a workshop, comma, and then keep the rest. I'm aware, Councillor Kurak, you had some suggestions on depreciation. Are you happy that rather than they go in the resolution that they are received by the team to consider, or would you like to try to put them into the resolution?
It'd be great if the mover and seconder would accommodate it.
Rick sent these around. Yes, here they are on the board.
I'll speak to it. It's just around us getting a better understanding of, as I mentioned before, around the policy and approach to funding of depreciation and the financial and debt impact of that in terms of OPEX and debt. So, yeah. Perhaps Craig, some comment?
Yeah, no objection to including all these topics in the review.
No objection then? So we'll add that to C. I just speaking to the motion, I think it's, I think we're seeing some positives coming out of the financials, which is fantastic. And I think to Rod's point, really important that we do make sure we do make it visible that the savings that are being found within the organisation and not have them, I guess, stomped out by great big changes that are one-offs. I think the operational efficiencies group has got the opportunity to really improve some of our reporting and therefore some clarity on how the numbers are presented to us so that we can ensure we're making good governance decisions on those. And I think it's, I think also just a recognition of 5 of you presenting and understanding the numbers. It gives us confidence in those numbers. So thank you for that. That work. Any other comments on Q3 financials? Councillor Crowther. Oh.
No, I was just going to reiterate the Chair's and Councillor Taylor's comments around great work from the financial team. It's clear that you're achieving what we're trying to get to. It's clearer, we understand it better, but also from the public's point of view, us being better and more efficient and Council's contractors being better and more efficient is actually bringing projects completion dates forward, and it's having an impact on our accounting process. And what appears by a statement made, it's also going to happen with CWEM. So by us getting more efficient, it's actually creating more issues for our finance department. So we'll just have to find out how we do all this better and report things in a way that has less impact on our annual plan balance sheet there, because we are a continuously moving machine with projects constantly happening all the time, but we just, between the physical and the reporting, we need to get a bit better. But no, well done to the finance team. Thank you.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, ditto for the finance team. Thank you very much for the report. I think my concern is around the write-offs, and not so much with what's here, although that is a bit of a concern in terms of the principle, but more the longer term impacts. I'm just thinking of Marty's book again, and the whole basis for working through projects. What seems to work well internationally is to actually have a lot of work up front, and some of that work is basically thrown away. And that's one of the key lessons that I take from talking to people who've delivered projects, especially big projects, is that you have to be not afraid to actually throw away things. But the implications of that are, should you actually look at that as part of a project development cost which is capitalised, or should they be OPEX? And I strongly hold the view they should be part of the CAPEX for it, and they should be allocated when people will benefit from it. And I'm thinking particularly with transport that we have been, as a council, in my view, and apologies to a couple of the members here, behind the 8 ball for many years on transport. I would say since the 2012 strategy, or whatever it was called, because the work was done in terms of the concept, and Marty's done some good work getting the transport system plan in place, but we don't have all the projects all lined up ready to go. And our head of transport has articulated very clearly a process where we could do business cases, or now we've heard that there'll be scope to maybe to have an increased opportunity to do up to a $5 million project without a full business case. So that's one thing, but to do the work to get ready to push the button on that when the funding comes, you have to do a lot of planning up front. And I can just see, the possibility is another change of government in a few years' time, and we'll have a whole lot of projects all at this point, and that'll be a much bigger number there. So instead of, just whatever it is, total of just under 5 mil, we might be talking, 25 mil or something, and it would be such a waste if that can't be seen as part of a longer term process. So I don't have a solution to that, but I guess I'm raising a concern.
There being no other comments, I'm happy to put this motion to the table. All of those in favour, please say aye. And against, that is carried. Thank you. And we are going to take a 10-minute break. Recognising we are breaking for lunch at 12:40. Yeah. So we come back at 12:05, please.